So can I welcome as substitutes Councillors Breckles, Dyer, Fitzjohn and Hornham. Sorry. And so that's splendid, thank you. Could I also just say there are 3 housekeeping rules for members of the public. Firstly, if you've got a mobile, please switch off. Secondly, if you need the toilets, they're either side of the entrance. Thirdly, no fire alarm is expected, so if it goes off, it's a real thing. We go out the front entrance, down to the right on the ramp, and we assemble by the Cathedral Piazza. So can we move to apologies for absence and substitutions, Ali?
Yes, Chair, for the record, we have apologies from Councillor Hathaway with Councillor Dyer substituting, Councillor Goggin with Councillor Breckles substituting, Councillor Plowden apologies with Councillor Fitzjohn substituting, and Councillor Hulme with Councillor Hunyan. Hope I said that okay. Substituting apologies.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? No. Minutes of the last meeting, these have been circulated and approved by the lead members. I suggest they're actually approved, subject to the one very small tweak. On item 4, membership of the committee, it says Councillor Steve Pearce will act as the general substitute if required. Obviously, that's for the Labour group. I suspect the Lib Dems, Greens or the Conservatives might have an issue otherwise. So if we can add that.
Yes, sure.
Is there a seconder, please? Andrew, thank you. Let's move on to the action sheet at 5. Gary, item 1.
Thank you, Chair. So item 1 on the action sheet was for me to discuss with Councillor Plowden a couple of enforcement cases in his ward, which we did after the last meeting, and he's had a couple of updates since, so I'm content that he's getting those cases investigated and regular updates.
That's correct. Item 2, we've had quite a bit of debate here about planning enforcement. Councillor David Wilcox, the chair of the Growth and Regeneration Commission, they're having a session on this in September. As of yesterday, in an email to me, he said they've not agreed a date, but I asked if they can let me know when they've decided. And the contact, because he's also asked for us to actually circulate an invitation for you to give your experience of planning enforcement. So as soon as that's forthcoming, I'll come back to you. 6 appeals, Gary.
Thank you, Chair. There were 2 that I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention. The first is item 9 on page 17 of the papers, which relates to 493 to 499 Bath Road in Brislington. This relates to a decision made by DCA pre-election, so it's been around a long time. So it's a decision that they made in line with officer recommendation to refuse permission based on 2 grounds. One was the failure to comply with the heat hierarchy set out in the local plan, and also there were some design and amenity issues in terms of the impact on proposed residents within the development. The decision was appealed, and it has taken a long time for the Planning Inspectorate to progress that and come up with a hearing date, but as you'll see from the papers, that has recently been confirmed, and it is on the 31st of August. It's taking place here in City Hall, so obviously it's a public process. If anyone wants to go along and hear the discussions around that, then you're more than welcome to. As is normal with appeals, though, in hearings, the inspector will hear the evidence and discussions from both sides, and then we'll go away and they'll then write their decision. And obviously, as soon as we hear about that, you will hear about it too.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Yeah, thank you for the update, Gary. Can I just check, are members of the public allowed to make submissions before an appeal hearing?
Yes, they are. There is a time scale for that, and we would have written to interested parties around that. It is still possible, though, always at the discretion of the inspector, whether they can, if they haven't declared that already, whether they can on the day. What I would say, if I can look into what the consultation window for that was, and I can come back to you on that, if that's going to help.
So could they send an email to Democratic Services? Would that be an appropriate way to make their points heard?
I think it's no longer in the hands of the council, because this is the planning inspectorate's process, really. So I think what I can do is speak to the officer we have dealing with that hearing, and I can let you know the dates that apply and the contact number of the case officer in the planning inspectorate to make that kind of contact with, because it's their show, really. Even though it's being held here, it's their process.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because a local resident has been in touch wishing to make comments, and I wasn't sure how they go about that. So if you could let me know, that'd be excellent. Thank you very much.
I think you were quite clear, Gary, but Alison Taylor seemed to have strong views, and it's a brave man whoever stops her from speaking.
No, just not strong views, just to say that that would be outside of our remit and Democratic Services. Planning Inspectorate's a completely different body, so has nothing to do with us.
Tony, did I say you raised an arm? No. Right. And before moving on then, could I just welcome actually Councillor Hussain, who's a permanent replacement for Councillor Pearce. I'm sure you'll enjoy the committee. In my view, I'm probably biased, but I think it's one of the most meaningful and rewarding committees we serve on, so that's good. So I'm also conscious that although I know you represent a ward central split by the River Avon, you actually spent 7 years working and living in South Bristol. So in my view, that's a second reason to welcome you and congratulate you. Gary would just like to raise one other case.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The other case I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention was number 48, which is on page 23. And you'll see there, it's the unusual combination of a proposal. This was off Southby Road, seeking outline permission for the erection of a dwelling. The unusual case where the appeal was dismissed, so permission wasn't granted, but costs were awarded against us. So this is a case where, as members will appreciate, we're carrying a bit of a backlog in terms of our caseload at the moment, unfortunately. And it is possible for applicants to appeal against non-determination, basically go beyond the council and go to the planning inspectorate and seek a decision from them. So that's what happened in this case. Unfortunately for the applicant, the planning inspectorate refused permission for the scheme, but it looks as if the planning inspectorate felt the council had acted unreasonably, not so much in terms of not dealing with the case in a timely fashion, but not communicating that, really, which is, I thought it was something we had built into the system, but maybe we've introduced that since this case was considered. I have been informed of this by the case officer, and also advised that the cost award is fairly minimal, Chair. So it's a lessons learnt, but it's not of any real significance financially to the council, just to reassure you.
Thank you, Gary. Can we move on to item 7, which is enforcement? As you will see, there's 0 enforcement notices, which for some of us is a legitimate concern. But can I suggest we leave that in abeyance, since we're going to have a detailed look at that in September? Could I therefore move on to item 8, the heart of the meeting properly, democratically, so public forum. Now, we do deal with individual statements prior to individual applications, but we also have some questions from Suzanne Audrey. Now, Suzanne's not here today, but you should have seen electronically her questions and the replies. So that's a matter of public record. Gary Collins would like to put that in context, so I'm going to invite him to briefly speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I wouldn't normally comment on a public forum statement. That's for officers, to, the case officer to address, and also for members to consider as part of their decision making. But there were some references in the statement, which is statement 8.3, relating to political influence and perhaps a blurring of exec and non-exec roles within the council relating to planning. I just wanted to completely reassure you that that is not happening at all. Clearly, when whoever is in control of the council, they will quite understandably seek updates on developments and things like that, especially when it relates to council priorities. So on occasions, of course, we are asked to provide updates, but in no way is that ever getting close to decision making. The decision making on planning applications rests entirely with the committees and officers using delegated powers delegated by yourselves. So just wanted to make that really, really clear, in the light of the statement that's been made there. So thank you for that opportunity, Chair.
Can we therefore move on to the first application, the Chanson food site? Now we have four submissions on this. Can I first of all call Paul Smith, please? Paul, if you could go to the middle. The mic should be turned on, so just address it. And if you stay back probably about 4 or 5 inches from it, it should be perfect. If all members have actually received your statement and read it, could I ask you please and the subsequent speakers to summarise their statement in about 1 minute, please?
Good evening, councillors. I'm Paul Smith. I'm the University of Bristol's Director of Campus Operations. The university supports this application. Host is an experienced student accommodation operator which would look after the students and maintain good relationships with the wider community. Building purpose-built student accommodation in the right location provides high quality and affordable accommodation for our students, but it also helps to keep further pressure off existing homes in the city, which we appreciate is a major issue and a priority for the council. The site is next to our Temple Quarter campus, and the university also supports the delivery of the footbridge across the floating harbour. We consider that this application and others locally should all contribute to the delivery of the bridge and welcome discussions to ensure the bridge can be delivered for the benefit of all parties. We would ask that those discussions proceed if you approve the application today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can I invite John Niblett to address us, please?
Good evening, councillors. I'm John Nesbitt, Managing Director of Host Student Housing. We have developed 10,000 beds and are currently managing 10,000 beds across the UK. We fully understand the importance of our relationship with the existing community, so I'm delighted the Dings Community Association and Ward Councillor Hibak Jama both support our application. Our scheme would play a key role in regeneration of this area. We're investing in major public realm improvements, including opening up the waterfront to public access for the first time in centuries, with a 5-metre wide walkway along the front of our scheme. This would connect to the pedestrian bridge proposed by the university. Our scheme will contribute 1.6 million of SIL, which could support the bridge. Our design means there will be no impact on Motion nightclub, but we've also agreed to a deed of easement because we want to be good neighbours. By building next to Temple Quarter campus and working with the University of Bristol, we can also help ease pressure on the existing housing stock by ensuring students live close to where they study.
John,
Thank you,
could I
and please
bring you to a close, please?
Yep, thank you, and please support our application.
Thanks. We have two other submissions from Suzanne Audrey, who can't be here today. David Ridgewell, I can't see David here, so can we take his statement into consideration, please? So with that, could I invite the officer to actually introduce the report? You obviously have the customary 5 minutes, Ken, but as I always say, less is more.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Right, I shall keep that in mind. So I'll just run through the application. This is site location showing the Chanson food site in regards to Temple Station. I've provided here just a bird's eye view of the Chanson food site, which is situated here, just south of the railway line to Temple Station. There's again some visuals, there's some photographs of the current Chanson food site, taken from Avon Street and from Temple Meads and across the Fullerton Harbour. I provided this gives some context, and this is taken from the Temple Quarter Spatial Framework. It just shows you the sort of key sites within the Temple Quarter, including the Chanson food site. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Apologies. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. So yeah, this is just showing the context. Is that better? Yep. Okay. This is just showing the context of the site within the spatial framework. So this is taken from an extract from the framework. And this gives you the emerging sites in regards to how it relates to the Chanson food site. Just to briefly give an overview of the application, as you read in the report, it's an application for purpose-built student accommodation, providing 471 beds, arranged over cluster flats, which I'll come to in a second. You can divide the site into 3 blocks, ranging from 8 to 12 stories. This shows you the ground floor layout of the student welfare areas, the study areas, the post room, reception. The bedrooms are going to be on the upper floors, so from level 1 upwards. And there's puppet realm works as well, are proposed, as you heard from the developers. This is a site plan of the first floor showing the arrangement of the cluster flats. As I said, there's 12 floors altogether. I won't go through all of them, but this gives you an idea of the arrangement. And you also have the hub building, which would form the commercial element, providing flexible uses, including cafe or office space. And this would face onto the waterfront. This is just a view of the roof plan, floor at the 11th floor. And this is the overall roof plan from the highest point of the tallest block to the north of the site. To provide some elevations here, give you an idea of the block as viewed from Avon Street and as viewed from the Kawasaki site. And the top view is from the harbour, and this gives you, well, it's a visual looking south from Temple Meads. Obviously, you wouldn't see all that, but that gives you an idea of the elevations. I'll provide some visuals here. This just shows you, if you walk along Avon Street, what the block would look like if you walk along there, with railway line in the background. The next visual is taken across from the harbour, and the one below is taken from the plaza adjacent to Valentine's Bridge. So to give you an idea of the setting. Just on some of the key issues, heritage came up. This plan shows how the site's evolved. So the images on the left show the original submission, and the images on the right show the revised scheme, hence Historic England's revised comments. Overall, the development has been reduced so it doesn't have the impact on hedged assets, in particular towards Templeweed railway station. This again just shows you the site in the context of the conservation area and the buildings. And as you see in the report, the conclusion is that there would be no harm and that the benefits are quite significant in terms of what the site would bring to the Temple Quarter. I've provided this updated flood protection plan of the ground floor. At the moment, the EA had a holding objection. However, they have indicated to us, having seen this updated plan of the passive and active flood protection measures, that they're going to withdraw their objection. If they do that, then obviously we can determine it as it is. If they still have an holding objection, then we would have to refer to the Secretary of State. However, as I said, the EA have indicated that this addresses their minor points they had in terms of the scheme. This is just showing the plan of the flood escape arrangements. So I've just put that in there for your information, which proposes a walkway and the access routes in event of flooding. And I've just put this in here because the issue of the bridge came up, and this just shows the overall access routes in context. So I've provided that for information as well. In terms of other key issues, in terms of sustainability, the developer is confident that they meet all the policies there. At the moment, there is a slight shortfall in terms of meeting the 20% target. However, there is the offset which could be used. They have indicated to us that, subject to further refinement, they can reach that, and we ask members to delegate the conditions in regards to sensibility to officers to actually finalise. Also, we ask members to delegate the conditions with regard to DZ easement as well, as you heard, regarding issues regarding motion. And also, subject to the EA's final formal response, as I said, they've indicated that they will probably lift their objection. We also give the officers the authority to delegate the conditions in regards to flooding. And that's it.
Thank you, Ken. Just in case members thought I was going dangerously liberal, since we had some audio problems initially, I tend to have a degree of latitude. We now move to questions for any new members. Please contain yourself purely to questions on the officer's report or his presentation. Obviously, views can be expressed in the subsequent debate. Andrew?
I might have missed something. Can you, two things. The first one, can you just clarify in words of one syllable the Environment Agency's thoughts around the flooding? Because have they still not got back to us about this? Because this has been hanging around for months and months and months and months, to my certain knowledge. So, and it's all very well sort of saying, yeah, we think it's going to be okay, but obviously I feel slightly uneasy about that. The second thing was, there's been a number of comments around the plant on top of the, if plant were put on top of the building itself, then that would have an adverse impact on the heritage aspect of the scheme. Is that something we can condition? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first. In regards to plant, yeah, we can condition that because they have historically were the view that actually, yeah, that we can condition. And they suggested, I mean, basically it's just a condition saying that any plant shouldn't go above the parapet of the tallest element of the building. So we can put that on there. So yeah, it's not going to be an issue.
Can you address the flooding issues?
Yeah, I was going to pass you to Lewis about that due to his involvement in the Silverfall Lane schemes.
Hello, councillors. Sorry, I know many of you, but my name's Lewis Cook, and I'm the team leader for the Enterprise Zone. And for my sins, I've been dealing with flooding issues in this area for quite some time. So, if you do have questions on that, I'm happy to try and answer those. The position we're in at the moment, there is still a holding objection from the EA on quite technical grounds to do with essentially the level of climate change allowance that should be incorporated into the level of defence for the new development. I can go into that. It's quite dull, but I'm happy to outline that if members want me to. But essentially, the position is we've had 2 appeal decisions on nearby sites, the Sumex site and the Silverthorne Lane site. I don't know if Ken, you want to just pull up the area plan and just indicate where those are on the site. Both of those essentially relied entirely on flooding issues. So the long sort of purple element is the Silverthorne Lane site, and the Sumex site. I don't know if you can indicate that with your mouse, Ken, but that's sort of at the junction of Avon Street and Feeder Road. Now, what's happened out of that the EA have given certain recommendations so the Inspector and the Secretary of State on those 2 appeal schemes gave their recommendations about levels and those sort of issues. As a result of that, the applicant has come back to us and amended their scheme to try and take account of those recommendations about levels. Now, what the EA have essentially said to us is, in principle, they're happy with what the applicant has put forward, but they'd asked for some clarification and some further works in terms of how they could defend their ground floor. So we're talking about the ground floor only. Upper floors, which is where all the residential accommodation is well clear of the flood level. But they've asked for some further clarification on those issues. We've had that from the applicant. That's come to us relatively recently. So the EA have provided us with an indication that they're happy that covers their issues, but they haven't had the chance to provide us with a formal response. So that's essentially what we're waiting for. By all accounts, as I say, they are happy with it. So hopefully there shouldn't be any more objections from them. But they are the statutory consultees on flooding issues, and therefore, if they do continue to object, as Ken said earlier, we would have to refer it to the Secretary of State.
Am I correct, actually, if we look at the actual recommendation, it's grant not approve, so it's dependent upon the Environment Agency's view. We might move it further up the food chain. Yeah.
That's correct, Chair. I think if the EA come back and confirm their indication of no objection, then we just progress the Section 106 agreement in the normal way, if the committee resolves to grant permission. If the EA take us by surprise and say, oh no, we maintain an objection, then we have to refer it to the Secretary of State.
Pete, are those 2 replies to your questions? Fine. Andrew?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few questions, and thank you, Ken, for the presentation. Firstly, just following from what Fee was saying, so can we be absolutely sure that the roof line of Temple Meads will not be broken as viewed from Bath Road if we condition the fact that plant won't go any higher than the 12 stories?
Yeah, as I was saying, if we condition that the plant doesn't go above the parapet, then there's not going to be an issue. What the visuals, the TVI views showed was that if you look in the context of which station, you wouldn't actually see the top part of the tallest element, which is 12 stories. So Historic England was saying, provided that's no huge plants which then project above the parapet areas, then they're confident and satisfied that actually there's not going to be an issue. So we can condition that to absolutely sure that there's not going to be any projection above that roof line.
Thank you. Also, just regarding the loss of employment land, so at the moment, I believe the site employs 13 people. Do we know how many people will be employed if this development gets the go-ahead? Because obviously there's a commercial unit at the hub and also people employed on site.
I remember that, actually. I haven't got the figures for that at hand.
Maybe the host person knows.
Yeah.
At least 9.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fabian.
Thank you. Just,
Sorry.
one more question. Sorry about that. Just about the heating system. So I know there's a desire to have it connected to the district heat network in the future, but in the meantime, what is the proposed heating system?
Well, no, what I've indicated that it will be from day one connection to the heat network, so there's not going to be an issue with that. I've been told by the energy team that at the moment the network's only about 45 metres away from the site at the current time, so you know, by the time this actually starts, they should be able to connect from day one, and the applicants have agreed with that.
That's
yeah.
perfect. Thank you very much.
Fabian.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, all right, but okay. No, well, obviously I've been called, but you'll come after me then. You put your hand up. You raise your hand, and then you called. Okay. On the flood protection options, on the slide it says that a couple of them are potentially temporary or permanent flood protections. I'd be thinking it would make more sense and possibly satisfy the EA more if we made those permanent rather than temporary flood protection, so the whole ground floor is permanent flood protections. Is that possible? It's not entirely sure which slide number it is. It's the flood protection option slide.
Oh, right, okay.
That one.
This one, isn't it? Yeah.
Shall I pick that up, Ken? So there are essentially two sort of ways of defending. Well, I suppose there's three ways of defending the ground floor. One is you just raise the ground level up. One is what they call passive solutions, which are something that's permanently in place to stop flooding getting into the building. And one is active, which means when there's a flood warning, somebody has to come along and essentially slots sort of planks into a predefined slot, which will defend the building. The preference is always for passive protection. The issue on this site is that you can provide passive protection, but what the EA are talking about is taking that passive protection up to about 10.9 metres AOD. And what that would be is essentially a concrete upstand. So you can clad it in what you want, but it would be a big lump of concrete. And if you go up to 10.9 AOD, that's around about 2.5 metres above the road level. So what that does is, if you're walking along Avon Street, you're confronted with a 2.5 metre solid structure. So what they've done instead is provided a combination of active and passive solutions, and ultimately the less important parts of the building, whilst we don't think will flood, there is still a chance that they will flood, but they are intending to provide protection up to a level for the core areas that would mean that they wouldn't flood in the 100 years that we're designing the building for. So there is an option of providing passive solutions, but it does have impacts on the street scene. So we've instead sort of negotiated a combined flood defence. The other thing that members might want to bear in mind is that in this location, flooding is dominated by tidal flooding rather than fluvial flooding. And ultimately the difference between tidal flooding and fluvial flooding is tidal flooding is much more predictable. We know where the spring tides are going to be for the next 100 years. We can tell you that now. The tidal flooding happens when there's a spring tide combined with certain weather conditions in the Atlantic, which means all the sort of water floods towards Bristol as the first place it meets. So weather prediction, we can. It's not a guarantee, but there is a level of certainty about tidal flooding that there isn't about fluvial flooding. So on that basis, we think the balance is about right between keeping the street scene and protecting the building. And as I say, in any case, all of the residential accommodation is on the first floor, and that is well above what we think is the potential flood levels in 100 years.
Okay. I suppose one option with the wall, because apparently with some flood defences, you could, rather than just putting a lump of concrete up, you could put, you know, concrete up 1 metre and then glass or something like that above, possibly.
Glass
I've got some other questions I wanted to ask, but I was just asking about whether it would have to be just purely concrete if they'd gone down that route.
Glass wouldn't provide the level of protection, so it would have to be a solid structure as a passive measure.
Whilst Fabian's questions are legitimate, of course, and this is probably the most serious health and safety issue we need to address, we must be aware we don't try to redesign a scheming committee, of course. We have an application, it's being considered by others as other agencies. We have a duty to actually
I know. I've got some more
judge the
questions,
scheme
Chair.
before us.
So on the flood escape plan, it's saying that there's a safe escape roof across the entrance roof. Across the entrance roof. Are they going to? I can't see in the design any suggestion that there'd be balustrades or anything like that. They're not just going to run expected to run across the roof without any sort of protection, are they?
I haven't studied the plan in any detail, but or in enough detail to be able to confirm that. But the point is that this would be used on an ultra rare basis. This is not something that they would use as a general means of going in and out of the building. This would be in the very specific circumstances that there was a flood and there was some kind of emergency which meant people had to get in and out of the building in a flood event. Most of the time people can happily stay in their rooms, and the flood event, I think it says in the report somewhere that flood event will be for around about 6 hours. So you wouldn't be trapped in your room, but you could remain in your room for that period, and by that time the flood waters will have gone away and you can access the building normally. So if there is a need to get into and out of the building in a flood event, that will be a managed thing, i.e. a member of staff will be there helping people into and out of the building, showing people where to go, unlocking the bits of the building they need to. So we're not ever going to be in the situation where people are running up and down that roof as a general thing without any sort of guidance.
Could I invite Gary Collins to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm pretty sure that where there's any kind of access from people, whether it's public or occupants, or even on maintenance purposes. So, for example, there is the potential for people to have to gain access across that roof. The building regulations require balustrading as part of it, so I think that would cover it. And if that then has a knock-on consequence for the real detailed design of this building, it'd be a non-material amendment. So I think we're pretty safe in saying that there will be balustrading in those circumstances.
Okay, final question. There's an existing business on the site. What happens to them? Are they going to relocate if this is granted?
Yeah, I mean, I know. I believe they are relocating. I don't know the exact details of it. I know that they've obviously there's an agreement to sell the site to developers. Yeah, that's what I know about it. So, yeah.
I also think we have to bear in mind the more wider policy framework. We've actually, as a council, approved a substantial change here, and it's going to actually accommodate the new university campus. So we need to realise and welcome and support change here. Tessa.
Okay, can you hear me? 3 points I wanted to make.
Sorry, questions, not points.
Oh, there are 3 questions then. Sorry. I'm sorry, I've only done this once before, so I'm on a bit of a learning curve, so forgive me if I'm not doing it quite by the book. My question is, where is your public art plan? This is a major development, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't one. And that relates to the fact that BCAP 35, the Central Area Plan, that relates, there is water side access is one important aspect, and community cohesion. So I'd like to know whether the applicant has been in discussion with the Dings about how they're going to engage with the new building. And the public art plan could work very nicely in that context.
Right, just a quick response to that. I don't know details of any discussion they've had with the community. However, we will attach a public art condition, which will cover that point in terms of kind of a public art plan, which our officers within the design team would review as well with them. So we've got that as standard in terms of that issue. So yeah, in answer to your question, I don't know the exact details, discussions they've had. However, we have got.
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear.
Sorry. Okay. Is that clearer? Yeah.
Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah, we have a public art condition attached, which that will involve the applicant providing us details of a public art plan. So yeah, in answer to the question, I'm not aware of any discussions they've had in terms of community involvement in that respect. However, we're quite confident with the public art condition that they would have to submit that to us, and we've got a public art officer who would then review that with ourselves and with the developers.
Okay. Thank you. Perhaps, Gary, what's happening about public art? Can I ask you that? Can I ask you, is it going to have a public art plan?
Yes, as Ken said, there'll be a condition attached to any permission that will require a public art plan to be.
Fantastic. That's great news.
Go through all that process. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very sorry. My hearing's particularly bad in this room.
Yeah, that's fine.
My second question relates to the fact that Urban Design have turned down this application, and they turned it down on the fact that they felt it didn't meet the livability criteria, and that was taken from the officer's report.
I'll respond to that if I can. So, dealing with any planning application, we seek comments from various contributors within, obviously external to the council, also within. And this is, in this case, our urban design colleagues who are now within the development management service now have expressed some issues around the scale of the development. So they've commented, ultimately negatively on the scheme, but they are one contribution to the overall weighing up of all the issues. So we've taken the overview that actually the scheme is supportable. I note within the report the Design West have made some positive comments about the proposal. So as case officers, we have to weigh up all the different views we get, really. So they haven't made a pre-decision on it. What they've done in this case is simply given us their comments within on the proposals, and as of a few months ago, they're now within the development management team. So I think that a closer collaborative working will happen, and those kind of comments will be more embedded within the main parts of the report.
Okay, thank you. Can I just one other question is the walkway that's going to be going, that you've broadened it out by 5 metres, I think, but there is some concern because of the school, that's the new school. There is likely to have children walking along there. Can you guarantee the safety of that walkway for families and young people?
Just on that, I mean, part of the development is also we've got public realm works, which we worked with our transport team with in terms of finalising the scheme. So we've got, again, we've got, as part of 106 and as part of our conditions, we can provide further details of that, if that's clear. So yeah, we're conditioning the scheme in terms of additional details, including the landscaping and including obviously the public realm. So that issue in terms of safety is a valid point, but again,
just thought
I'd mention it. It was
raised by the councillor for the area.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Tony.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. I'll tell you in advance. First question is in regards to the public realm, which is obviously you opened up the arbour side to public access, but I'm also conscious on the other side of the development where Avon Street is, that's a pretty awful walkway at the moment if you're a pedestrian walking down there or if you're a cyclist. So is there any plans to do some public realm on the road side of the development as well as on the harbour side? That's my first question.
Just again, in answer to that, you know, part of this scheme will involve Section 106 monies, which the transport team will contribute to the wider sort of Silverphone Island in terms of higher works as well. So that's like a pot to be put in there. So the applicants have agreed to a contribution to the realm works, but that's included the wider area. So it is envisaged that actually the frontage of that site would be improved by the combination of the applicant's offers to do some works to front the site, and also through the Section 106, we should be able to obviously secure those improvements in terms of highway works.
Okay, thank you. And related to that is there's been a couple of references in the offers in your report and also from the public forum about the footbridge. And I think it was mentioned there was discussion about contributions from SEAL being made towards that footbridge. Now, my understanding is that whether it's local SEAL or strategic SEAL, it's not possible for planning to say that it's definitely going to be spent on a particular project. So wouldn't S106 contributions be a better way of ensuring there is some contribution to the footbridge?
I think the provision of the footbridge, which is both an essential link between sites in the area and also essential for flood evacuation, it's always been a bit of a thorny issue there because we need the various developers to collaborate on that. The good thing about that is that in this particular area all seem to be university focused, so it's either SIL or it's a combination of the university and the individual developers. So it's in everyone's collective interest that it's delivered, because obviously the issue of the bridge is live with the university's current application across the road here. So that's still not determined. That's a significant volume of new development proposed. And also looking at this development, yeah, we certainly can't allocate the SIL from this to the, as you've said, really. I think what links this development to the provision of the bridge is the Grampian condition that says that it can't be occupied until the safe flood evacuation has been provided. And that was the level of certainty that the planning inspector accepted for the Summits development further south. And so I think it's only reasonable that we advise that those arrangements are still are acceptable also on this site. So whilst we haven't got the precise answer about how the bridge will be funded, when it will be delivered, we do know there's a collective interest between all the parties to deliver it, and a requirement from this development and others that it is delivered as well. So I think our position is that there's enough certainty in there to grant permission in these circumstances on the understanding that that bridge will ultimately be provided, because this development simply cannot be occupied without the bridge.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is a very quick one, and apologies if I missed it in the report.
I know this is probably not material to whether it gets approval or not, but why are all the new buildings in Bristol in brown brick? Because the surrounding area over there is sort of blue glass. Just interesting.
Basically, they've gone for that approach because it draws on historic character of the area in terms of the brickwork. So yeah, it's brown, but it is drawn from. They've done an analysis of the conservation area and the historic buildings, and the materials they've used are paying homage to what's there historically. So, yep, that's basically what I can say on that one.
It's probably just because the pictures you've actually got all the modern buildings in blue and white glass. And maybe if you had another view that wasn't on those pictures, it might make more sense.
Farah, did I see you? Yeah.
Just very quickly, one question on regards to the crime reduction, or safety and security, should we say. There's a proposal here by the crime reduction unit in regards to having a minimum standard of secured by design. Is that going to be part of the condition, or can we put it as part of a condition to make sure that that is in place?
I think because that's
because there's quite a few issues that they have raised in regards to safety, especially on Avon Street Road.
That's right, and that's not an untypical response from the architectural liaison officer at the police. I think what they look for is sort of acceptance in principle. At this level, looking at acceptance in principle to the design. I think the elements of secure by design are really specific things that if the developers do choose, and obviously it's recommended to go for secure by design accreditation, that's something administered by the police and something that the applicants would have to satisfy the police on in getting that certification, really. So I don't think it's really a matter for the committee at that level of detail. It's really something for the police to consider down the line when the developers approach them for that accreditation.
So we can't put it as part of a condition then to have the minimum safety standard?
We haven't in the past, really, because it's that level of
the detail,
and also it's kind of obviously it'd be a really good idea if the development did get secure by design accreditation. There's lots of development that the police look at as well, but it might sort of stretch whether the condition's reasonable in formally requiring them to get that accreditation. So I think it's maybe just a bit beyond what planning conditions should seek to do, really. I think it's in more the territory of good advice for the applicants to do that.
Okay, so all right, if we do not do, obviously, like you said, the secured by design is a bit too much for what we're doing at the moment. But couldn't we just add something about lighting then, to put more lighting around the area? Because that is one of the main concerns, and to stop, for example, possibility of rough sleepers and misuse of tunnel area. Yeah, or is that something beyond what we do here?
No, I think absolutely the right level of lighting around the scheme is absolutely an issue for the committee. I'm told there's a lighting condition, because what the conditions will typically do is require further submissions at a more detailed level on a number of subjects, and I'm informed that lighting is one of them, so it'll have to be acceptable through that mechanism.
That's fine, thank you.
Now, I thank members for all their questions. Can we now move to the debate, please? And I'll kick off. The first issue I always look for is land use. Is it appropriate? And it's very clear that we as a council support the university in locating and developing a new university campus here. And obviously seeking to locate as much student accommodation around there in a secure, in a well-designed way. So for me, it ticks that box. Secondly, certainly beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but in my view, it's a well-designed scheme which seeks to make enhancements to both public realm and also local landscaping. So again, it ticks that box. I then look particularly at the risk to life and limb with the flooding issue. And as Fihanza said, this has been an ongoing issue, not just here, but in 20 or so similar city centre schemes also. And it probably wasn't helped by the fact the original governmental response on the Clanage Road site, which could have imperilled or stored probably a score of similar development schemes, at least as we've heard, the Silverthorne Lane and the other planning decision has actually given us some certainty here. And we've listened to our own drainage and flooding experts and also the Environment Agency, and we've heard they're satisfied with the moves and the measures. So again, for me, it ticks that box. I do not believe there's any evidence of damage or to the neighbouring heritage assets. We've heard the only major issue is proximity to the canopy of actually Templemead Station. Again, it doesn't apply here. It seems, again, positively, this is a good scheme from energy conservation. It's a BREEAM excellent scheme. It plans to link to the district heating network when that comes on stream. And finally, personally, I think the fears raised by the Motion Night Club are somewhat excessive, but certainly the offer from the applicant of a deed of easement, in my view, addresses that concern. So on that basis, I have no hesitation in supporting this application. Fabian.
Thank you, Chair. I too like this. I think, I know I was one of, many of us got quite annoyed when there was such this plethora of student accommodation turning up in parts of the city where we need often what I would have preferred to have had housing for permanent residents. But this is bang on, right by the new university campus. It's the obvious place. The university is expanding. This is the absolute obvious place to put student accommodation. I like the building. It's a nice modern development. The whole area is being regenerated with, modern buildings of varying styles, all modern, mostly modern, and buildings of their age. I think, yes, I do think, the issue of lighting and security will need to be addressed. Probably the need for surveillance cameras as well, just to help protect and provide evidence in case anything does happen. I'm very pleased about the deed of easement, although I think it might be wise to make that a condition, just to put everybody's mind at rest. But I think, that's, absolutely right. The motion was there first, this is coming in afterwards. But I like the design. I think it'll fit in well in the area. I mean, loads of big inner city stations you come through, and there's lots of new stuff going around. And, you think what our station was like before. The station's being regenerated, £95 million being won off the government. That's being transformed and restored. And this just fits in with that, so I'm going to give it my backing, no problem.
Thanks, Fabian. With regard to Fabian's point about the deed of easement, the applicants said they're more than happy to actually offer this. Can we add this to the conditions, Ken?
Yeah, we can. I did on the report, on the amendment sheet, include that as suggestions of condition. So yeah,
fine.
We can do that.
Good. Andrew.
Thank you. Yes, just a couple of responses to some of the key issues. So firstly, the loss of employment land. Well, I don't think that really applies actually, because this new development is actually going to provide employment. So for me, that's not an issue. In terms of the flood risk, I note that it's now going to be protected to 10.96 metres all around, which is what the Environment Agency were requesting. So I'm happy with that. In terms of the conservation area, I'm placated in terms of the fact that it will not be visible from the Bath Road overlooking the roofline of Templemead, so that's fantastic. And also regarding the design, like Councillor Breckles, I quite like the design actually, and sorry, Katja, I do quite like the red brick in this case, although it doesn't work everywhere. I think it looks really quite nice, has an industrial aesthetic. It's reinvigorating a long derelict site in Bristol, and fantastic new public access. So I'm really looking forward to be able to walk along the riverside there. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Katja? No. Fee?
I think one of the most remarkable things about this application is it's a big application. There were so few objections to it, because usually anything of this sort of size and scale, attracts an awful lot of negative attention. So, give with the easement business sorted out and with the plant, the condition underground the plant, I've got absolutely no hesitation in recommending this for approval. It's fine.
In that case, I've seen no other hands. Can I propose as subject to the conditions and the easement being added? Fabian? Yeah, that's correct. No, a name vote. 4. Tony?
4.
Andrew?
4.
Tessa? 4 or against or abstain? 4. John? Farah?
4.
Fabian?
4.
Katja?
4.
And I will vote 4. So unanimously granted. Thank you again. So we just have a brief change of personnel here. And we'll move on to our second application, which is Land up Marshall Walk. Tony's making us move there reminds me it's still fairly muggy. If anyone in the public gallery or members want iced water, it's there, please. So help yourself. Got your own gin glass, so you're okay. Summarise it in about a minute, please.
I act on behalf of the applicant, Bristol City Council Housing Delivery Team. This application seeks the redevelopment of a brownfield site to provide 12 affordable dwelling houses in line with the council's aspirations. The scheme proposes an innovative residential development seeking to make the most efficient use of a disused brownfield site whilst utilising a modular construction method. It would provide a much needed type of housing in a sustainable location. The proposed housing would provide 100% affordable units, which is in line with policy, and will contribute to the council's corporate objectives set out in its housing delivery plan. The scale and layout of the development enables effective and efficient use of land to be delivered whilst also responding to the immediately surrounding context and safeguarding the amenity of the existing development. The key benefits are the provision of 12 dwellings, 100% affordable when policy requires 30%, 100% reduction in residual CO2 emissions when policy requires 20%, high quality landscaping enhancement and improved accessibility and permeability. Having worked with the LPA and statutory quantities, none of which object, and with the clear material benefits of the proposal, it is considered that the planning application should be approved in line with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Could I invite Alex to give his presentation? Again, you have 5 minutes, but don't feel obliged to use all that.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a BCC-led application for the construction of a block of 12 residential. So the site is located within the Inns Court area of the Philwood ward. It's just highlighted in red here. and the site is unallocated in the Bristol local plan. The surrounding area is largely residential, as you can see from the image here, with the Inns Court Community Centre located to the east of the site, which is this sort of light coloured building here. And then just to the southeast, there is a post office and a shop. The site itself fronts a circular parking area, which is utilised by the shops and also the community area, and there's a grassed area opposite with some trees. So the site was previously developed, but the previous buildings on site were demolished prior to 2008. The site currently consists of an area of hard standing with an area of open space which adjoins the corner of Inns Court Avenue, which you can just see on the right-hand side of the image here. Just moving on to talk about the proposed development. So the proposals are for a block of 12 flats, which would be in use class C3, intended for the use by single persons. It's intended that the units are to be used as temporary or supported move-on accommodation by the council. The proposed development would also include a pocket park, which is located at the southern end of the scheme. So that would create a link between Marshall Walk and the houses to the west of the site via a newly adopted pedestrian route. The intention is that the development would be car-free, but in line with BCC's parking standards, 2 disabled spaces are also to be provided on Marshall Walk. They're just highlighted in blue on the plan here. So the block would be 2 stories in height, as shown on the image there, and constructed with a red brick and metal cladding. And each of the flats would be self-contained, including a living room, a bedroom, and a shower room, and they would meet the nationally described space standards for a single-person, 1-bedroom unit. As mentioned previously, the scheme includes an extensive landscaping scheme with trees fronting Marshall Walk and a new pocket park linking the houses to the west of the site. And this slide just shows some of the semi-private amenity space to the rear of the block at the bottom of the image there, and also the communal garden space, as well as the tree-lined frontage onto Marshall Walk. And this is just a further view from Marshall Walk. So this includes the amenity space proposed to the front of the flats, which is visible, including the street trees, the hedges, and some bin storage. So there's been one comment in objection to the scheme. This raised concerns about impact upon services generally in the area, and also raised a concern about access to the shops, but that's considered to be addressed with a new pedestrian route, which is provided with lighting and a clear route for pedestrians. The scheme was also referred to committee by Councillor Jackson. Just moving to summarise some of the key issues. So the proposed development is supported in principle by the local plan and would provide 100% affordable housing. There have been no objections from consultees on technical matters. The scheme meets all the policy requirements for CO2 reductions and provides an on-site net gain in biodiversity. And just moving on to the recommendations, so it's recommended that the scheme is granted subject to the planning agreement, including those obligations that are listed on screen and subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alex. Alex, you'll go for 2 minutes to spare. Gary, double his salary, please. Seriously, should we move on to questions first? Andrew?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alex, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. I didn't have a chance to read the councillor's referral. Do you know why Councillor Jackson referred this scheme? 'Cause it does seem to be quite straightforward.
I was going to raise this, and Andrew, you nobly asked a question at the agenda conference. Some months ago, a council-owned development scheme, Kings Weir in Philwood, was actually approved under delegated authority. In retrospect, both members and officers felt in future ones where we could seem to have a conflict of interest, being the owner and the planner, we ought to publicly deal. So Chris, as a ward councillor, referred it here, not so much that he had concerns or criticism, but purely so the issue could be publicly aired.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. So my second question is just about the people who will be living in these units. So obviously they're designed to be temporary units, so people will be staying for 2 years and then moving on. So that means there will be sort of 12 lots of removals every couple of years, if my mathematics is right. So that means there'll be lots of removal vans coming and going, but it's a car-free development. There are no spaces for that. Is that going to be an issue, do you think?
So there isn't actually a limit on the length of the occupancy, but the intention is that it will initially be used for temporary accommodation. So it will be they will be sort of functioning as a normal dwelling house unit, but it will be specifically allocated as a social rent for single persons. So effectively, there won't be any necessarily any more removals than normal. So we haven't included a sort of a loading bay or anything like that, but obviously there is parking available within the forecourt opposite and also along Innscourt Avenue as well if that's needed.
Are there any other questions? Effie?
Slightly smaller, but I saw in one of the objections there was a comment around the trees and that there was trees being taken down but being replaced by inappropriately small hawthorn bushes, was it? I can't remember from memory. There was something on those lines. Why are there not trees being put back instead of inappropriately small hawthorn bushes?
Yes.
It's foodling, but I thought I'd ask.
No, that's fine. And yeah, it's something that we have addressed since the committee report was published. So on the agenda, on the amendment sheet, there's a response from the arboricultural officer and the ecologist, which says that they're now happy with the species of tree. I forget off the top of my head which it is, but I think it's what they refer to as a climax species on Innscourt Avenue. So they're happy with that replacement, which I think was going to be an ash tree, which was suffering from ash dieback, unfortunately. So they've now replaced that with a more appropriate species.
My apologies for failing to read all the papers properly. Sorry.
Fabian?
Yeah, just a simple question, really. You say they're for single occupancy, but I mean, it should be possible for a couple to live there if they wanted. I mean, obviously it's too small to have children there, but I mean, I'd have thought, I'm assuming there's that degree of flexibility in it, and it's not just restricted to only singletons.
So the nationally described space standard for this size of unit does actually, and the bedroom only is large enough for a single bed. And the way that the housing sort of waiting list works is that this is intended to remove people who are specifically in that situation where they are a single person that's on a waiting list.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't see another hand, so shall we move to the debate? I'll be very brief in my views. To me, this is a no-brainer. We all recognise a housing crisis in Bristol is probably the number one issue. If anyone particularly suffers, even more than first-time buyers and people getting on the housing ladder, it's people who want move-on accommodation, and the very sort of people this targeting, like people who've been in care, homeless people, are just the sort of people we'd be helping. Possibly the extension that could be is people in institutionalized care, perhaps in the armed forces or in prison in the past, or a juvenile offenders institution, because those tend to be the same sort of people who fall into homelessness easy. So this seems a no-brainer to me. I'll be backing this. It's a non-car scheme. It's on a brownfield site. It makes sense, so yes, I'll be voting for it. Fabian?
Yeah, I forgot one question I was going to ask is what was actually on the site before? Do we know? But I'm just curious.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I know it predates Google Maps. So I think potentially they might have been residential dwellings previously, sort of the prefab sort of construction that has been cleared obviously across Bristol. But yeah, I can't confirm for certain.
Yeah, but okay, I agree with Richard though. I think it is a no-brainer, and you know we do have a housing crisis, and it's 100% affordable, and it will help get people who are particularly stuck with finding suitable accommodation off the system. So, yeah, I'm going to be supporting it as well.
Do I see any? Everyone shares those sentiments. Fine. In that case, can I formally move the vote that we grant this subject to conditions? Second, Fabian?
Yeah, all right.
Thanks. And I'll do a name vote. V, Tony, Andrew,
4,
Tessa, John, Farah,
4,
Fabian,
4,
and Katja.
4.
And I'll vote for. So again, it's unanimously approved. Before we formally close the meeting, I appreciate it's may have slightly dimmed. It's not as it's been, but it's still clammy. And I'm sure you want to rush off to for a chilled glass or bottle of wine. So I won't delay you much, but most of you will be aware that Zoe Wilcox, our Director of Planning, is retiring last year. In fact, it's after a third of a century serving this city in a planning role, which, as I said last night, is more than murderers get often these days. But seriously, I think we should pay tribute to Zoe for her commitment, her expertise and help to members, but equally wish her well for a long and happy and healthy retirement, of course. And then can I formally close the meeting and just bring your attention to our next meeting, which is the 24th of August, 2 p.m. here.